We cannot impose a military solution on what has effectively become a civil war. And until we acknowledge that reality, we can send 15,000 more troops, 20,000 more troops, 30,000 more troops. The situation in Iraq has improved. Violence has been reduced substantially from the horrific sectarian killing of 2006 and 2007. I don't know any expert on the region or any military officer that I've spoken to privately that believes that that is going to make a substantial difference on the situation on the ground. Al-Qaeda in Iraq has been dealt a serious blow by our troops and Iraq's security forces, and through our partnership with Sunni Arabs. I am not persuaded that 20,000 additional troops in Iraq is going to solve the sectarian violence there. In fact, I think it will do the reverse. I think the capacity of Iraq's security forces has improved, and Iraq's leaders have taken steps towards political accommodation.
This is a cycle of self-sustaining sectarian violence that 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 Americans will not be able to stop.
And I am very optimistic about Iraq. I think it's going to be one of the great achievements of this administration. You're going to.
What happens after we surge these women and men? And by the way, he said General Petraeus is one who believes. He may be the only one who believes this is a good idea.
See 90,000 American troops come marching home by the end of the summer. You're going to see a stable government in Iraq that is actually moving toward a representative government.
Virtually no one else thinks it's a good idea.
I've been there 17 times now. I go about every 3 months. I know every one of the major players in all the segments of that society. It's impressed me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the president's surge is not a solution. It's a tragic mistake, and I will do everything in my power to stop it.
Members of that society, it's impressed me. I've been impressed how they have been deciding to use the political process rather than guns to settle their differences.
And you have been made the de facto spokesman for what many of us believe to be a failed policy. Despite what I view as your rather extraordinary efforts in your testimony both yesterday and today, I think that the reports that you provide to us really require the willing suspension of disbelief.
Today, I can report that, as promised, the rest of our troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year. After nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over. This will be a strong and enduring partnership. With our diplomats and civilian advisors in the lead, we'll help Iraqis strengthen institutions that are just, representative, and accountable. We'll build new ties of trade and of commerce, culture, and education that unleash the potential of the Iraqi people. We'll partner with an Iraq that contributes to regional security and peace, just as we insist that other nations respect Iraq's sovereignty. As I told Prime Minister Maliki, we will continue discussions on how we might help Iraq train and equip its forces. Again, just as we offer training and assistance to countries around the world. After all, there will be some difficult days ahead for Iraq. And the United States will continue to have an interest in an Iraq that is stable, secure,
I know some
and
in Washington would
self-reliant.
like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
Two things. One is ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion. which is an example of unintended consequences, which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.
On Friday, I ordered our forces to launch a cruise missile attack on the Iraqi Intelligence Service's principal command and control facility in Baghdad.
Which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.
Earlier today, I ordered American forces to strike Iraq. Our missiles sent the following message to Saddam Hussein. When you abuse your own people or threaten your neighbors, you must pay a price.
Which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.
To strike military and security targets in Iraq. They are joined by British forces. Their mission is to attack Iraq's nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons programs and its military capacity to threaten its neighbors. Their purpose is to protect the national interest of the United States and indeed the interests of people throughout the Middle East and around the world. Saddam Hussein must not be allowed to threaten his neighbors or the world with nuclear arms, poison gas, or biological weapons.
Virtually no one else thinks it's a good idea.
This is a very difficult vote. This is probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Any vote that might lead to war should be hard. But I cast it with conviction.
I had been president in October of 2002. I would have never asked for authority to divert our attention from Afghanistan to Iraq, and I certainly would never have started this war.
But I cast it with conviction.
Writing is on the wall, and it doesn't say mission accomplished. It says it's time to change course.
Do you believe we could have disarmament without regime change?
I doubt it. I can support the president. I can support an action against Saddam Hussein because I think it's in the long-term interest of our national security.
You don't make up or find reasons to go to war after the fact.
I think it would be naive to the point of grave danger not to believe that left to his own devices, Saddam Hussein will provoke, misjudge, or stumble into a future more dangerous confrontation with the civilized world.
Wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Not a debate.
The threat of Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction is real.
Person who is committed to ending this war. It is a grotesque mistake.
Saddam Hussein certainly has chemical and biological weapons. There's no question about that.
Saddam Hussein, in effect, has thumbed his nose at the world community. And I think that the president is approaching this in the right fashion. Myself, with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and you have to make your own decisions what the president knows. This war is lost.
See 90,000 American troops come marching home by the end of the summer. You're going to see a stable government in Iraq that is actually moving toward a representative government.
After nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over.
I've been there 17 times now. I go about every 3 months. I know every one of the major players and all the segments of that society. It's impressed me.
After nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over.
I've been impressed how they have been deciding to use the political process rather than guns to settle their differences.
Two things. One is ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion, which is an example of unintended consequences, which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.